My wife's new husband demanded his share of my dad's business, but my dad's lawyer exposed the hidden truth. The rain fell in a steady rhythm against the cemetery's manicured lawn, each drop a tiny percussion instrument in nature's somber orchestra. It seemed fitting somehow, the heavens themselves, mourning the loss of Harold Mercer. My father, my mentor, my foundation. I stood rigid under the black canopy, my gaze fixed on the polished mahogany casket as it hovered above its final resting place, adorned with a spray of white lilies. Dad's favorite, Daniel, my sister Claire whispered, squeezing my hand. You doing okay? I managed to nod but couldn't muster words. How could I possibly be okay? Just 10 days ago, Dad had been sitting across from me at our weekly business lunch, animatedly discussing expansion plans for Mercer Industries, the manufacturing company he had built from nothing but grit and vision 40 years ago. Now at 68, he was gone. A massive heart attack in the middle of the night, quick and merciless. Pastor Williams stood at the head of the grave, his voice carrying across the gathering of nearly 200 mourners, business associates, employees, friends and family who had come to pay their respects. Harold Mercer was a man who understood that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the lives he touched. I tried to focus on the pastor's words, but my mind was a carousel of memories. Dad teaching me to ride my first bike, Dad showing me around the factory floor when I was 12, proudly introducing me as the future of Mercer Industries. Dad standing beside me at my college graduation, his hand firm on my shoulder as he told me how proud he was. And most recently, Dad slowly transitioning control of day-to-day operations to me over the past 5 years, guiding me with patience as I stepped into his enormous shoes. The business had been his life's work, our legacy, and somehow, I had to find the strength to carry it forward without him. And now, Pastor Williams continued, Harold's son, Daniel, would like to say a few words. Claire gave me a gentle nudge. I straightened my tie and stepped forward, pulling the folded paper from my jacket pocket. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded it, but when I looked up at the sea of faces, many with tears streaming down their cheeks, I set the paper aside. Dad deserved words from the heart, not from a script. My father, I began, my voice surprisingly steady, never took shortcuts. Whether he was building a business or building a relationship, he believed in doing things right the first time. I paused, swallowing the lump forming in my throat. He used to tell me that integrity wasn't about the big decisions. It was about 1,000 tiny choices made when no one was looking. As I continued speaking, sharing anecdotes and life lessons from the remarkable man we were laying to rest, I noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Heads turned toward the back of the gathering. Whispers rippled through the crowd. I faltered mid-sentence, my gaze drawn to the source of the disturbance. And there she was, Vanessa. My ex-wife of 3 years, making her entrance in a fitted black dress that seemed more appropriate for a cocktail party than a funeral. But it wasn't her unexpected appearance that set my teeth on edge. It was the man beside her, tall, impeccably dressed in what I recognized as a custom Italian suit, his arm possessively wrapped around her waist. Garrett Wilson, her new husband of barely 6 months. What the hell were they doing here? Vanessa had met my father exactly 3 times since our divorce was finalized. She had no business showing up now, let alone bringing him. I felt a flash of anger so intense my vision briefly blurred. Claire must have sensed my reaction because she stepped closer, her hand lightly touching my arm, a silent reminder to keep it together. Drawing a deep breath, I forced myself to continue the eulogy, though every word now felt mechanical, delivered on autopilot while my mind raced. I spoke about Dad's generosity, his foresight, his unwavering principles. I managed to finish without my voice breaking, though it took every ounce of self-control I possessed. Rest well, Dad, I concluded. We'll take care of everything now. As the service continued, I couldn't help but steal glances at Vanessa and Garrett. They stood at the back, perfectly posed like a page torn from a luxury lifestyle magazine. Vanessa dabbed at her eyes occasionally with a pristine handkerchief. Though I doubted there were any genuine tears, I knew her too well, every gesture calculated, every expression carefully curated for maximum effect. After the final prayer, as attendees began to disperse, many approached to offer condolences. Old family friends embraced me, business associates shared stories of Dad's fairness and business acumen. Employees, some who had been with the company for decades, told me how Dad had changed their lives, given them chances when no one else would. "Your father gave me my first job when I had nothing but a GED and determination," said Frank Holloway, our production manager of 25 years, his weathered face streaked with tears. "He saw something in me nobody else did. That man believed in second chances. He never forgot where he came from." I agreed, finding comfort in these exchanges. I was speaking with Dad's oldest friend George Sullivan, when I sensed a presence at my elbow. I turned to find Garrett Wilson standing there, Vanessa a few paces behind him. Up close, his smile was even more insufferable. Practiced, confident, predatory. "Daniel," he said, extending his hand as if we were meeting at a networking event. "My sincere condolences." Harold was quite a force in the business community. I stared at his outstretched hand long enough for the moment to grow uncomfortable before briefly shaking it. "I wasn't aware you knew my father," I replied, making no effort to mask the chill in my tone. "We never had the pleasure of meeting in person," he admitted smoothly. "But I've followed his career, transforming a small machine shop into Mercer Industries." Impressive legacy. Something in his tone when he said, "legacy," made my skin crawl. Before I could respond, Vanessa stepped forward, her expression a masterpiece of practiced sympathy. "Daniel, I'm so sorry for your loss," she said, leaning in as if to embrace me. I took a subtle step back, and her arms fell awkwardly to her sides. "Your father was always kind to me." The audacity nearly made me laugh. Dad had seen through Vanessa almost immediately, though he'd been too much of a gentleman to say it outright. "Was he?" I replied coolly. "Funny, I don't recall you having much interest in him when we were married." A flash of something irritation perhaps crossed her perfect features before she composed herself. "Grief affects us all differently," she murmured, as if excusing my behavior rather than acknowledging her own hypocrisy. I glanced past them to where Claire stood speaking with Pastor Williams, silently pleading with my eyes for her to rescue me from this excruciating encounter. But before she could notice, Garrett cleared his throat and reached into his suit jacket. "Actually, while I hate to bring up business at such a difficult time," he said, producing a crisp envelope from his inner pocket, "there are some matters that will need attention, once you've had time to process your loss." I stared at the envelope he held out, bearing the letterhead of Blackwood and Pierce, one of the city's most aggressive law firms. "What is this?" I asked, though a sickening suspicion was already forming. "Just some preliminary correspondence regarding certain interests that will need to be addressed," he replied, his tone still irritatingly pleasant. "We'll be in touch about her share of the business." Her share? My father's business? The business she had shown nothing but disdain for during our 5-year marriage? The business she had actively tried to convince me to sell my stake in? I felt something dangerous stirring inside me, a rage so pure and concentrated it momentarily robbed me of speech. My hands clenched into fists at my sides as I fought to maintain composure. "Not here. Not at Dad's funeral. You should leave," I finally managed, my voice low and steady. "Both of you?" Garrett's smile didn't falter. If anything, it grew more self-assured. "Of course," he said, tucking the envelope into my jacket pocket when I refused to take it. "We understand this isn't the time or place. But do look that over when you're ready." He placed his hand on Vanessa's lower back. "We'll be in touch, Daniel." As they turned to go, Vanessa glanced back at me over her shoulder. For just a moment, I thought I glimpsed something like regret in her eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by the cool detachment I'd grown to know so well during the final year of our marriage. I watched them walk away, their figures silhouetted against the gray afternoon sky, and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. Even as I stood surrounded by mourners, even as Claire finally made her way to my side and wrapped a protective arm around my shoulders, I knew with absolute certainty, this wasn't over. It was, in fact, just beginning. "What did they want?" Claire whispered. I pulled the envelope from my pocket, turning it over in my hands but not opening it. "Not yet." "Trouble," I said simply. "They want trouble." As the last of the funeral attendees drifted away and cemetery workers stood respectfully at a distance, waiting to complete their solemn task, I remained rooted to the spot, unable to tear myself away from Dad's casket. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained heavy with clouds. "I'll handle this, Dad," I promised quietly. "Whatever they're planning, Whatever they want, I won't let them touch what you built. I swear it. A sudden gust of wind rustled through the nearby oak trees, sending a shower of water droplets cascading from their leaves. Whether coincidence or something more, I chose to take it as acknowledgement. As I finally turned to leave, the envelope heavy in my pocket, I felt something stir within me, a quiet determination taking root alongside my grief. My father had taught me many things. Among them, never start a fight, but always finish one. And finish this one I would. 3 days after we laid Dad to rest, I finally opened the envelope. I'd been avoiding it, focusing instead on the immediate aftermath of loss, helping Claire sort through Dad's personal effects, meeting with employees to reassure them about the company's future, and trying to process my own grief in the quiet hours when sleep refused to come. But the envelope sat on my desk like a ticking bomb, mocking me. I sliced it open with Dad's old letter opener. A brass antique he'd kept on his desk for 30 years. The legal letterhead of Blackwood and Pierce glared up at me, followed by 5 pages of dense legal language that boiled down to one outrageous claim. Vanessa, as my former spouse, was asserting a spousal interest in Mercer Industries through me, demanding a full financial accounting of the company and a fair and equitable distribution of my inheritance. My hands shook with rage as I read. She wanted 30% of my shares I'd inherited from my father, who had never included her in his will. Even more absurd, they were requesting a seat on the board for Garrett as her business representative. I grabbed my phone and dialed Claire. "Did you read it yet?" she asked immediately. "I can't believe this," I growled. "They're claiming she deserves part of Dad's company because she was married to me when I started working there. They're citing some obscure precedent about spousal contribution to career advancement." Claire's voice hardened. "That's ridiculous. She didn't contribute anything. In fact, I know," I cut her off, not wanting to rehash Vanessa's past interference. "I'm calling Langford right now." Good, Dad trusted him completely. If anyone knows how to handle this, it's him. I hung up and immediately called Richard Langford, my father's attorney for over 20 years. His secretary put me through instantly. "Daniel," his gravelly voice came through. "I was about to call you. I received a rather interesting communication this morning from Blackwood and Pierce. They sent me something too," I said. "She's claiming part of Dad's business, and her new husband wants a board seat." There was a pause and then unexpectedly, a low chuckle. "Mr. Langford, did you hear what I said? They're trying to take part of Mercer Industries." "I heard you, son. Come to my office tomorrow at 10. And Daniel? Try not to worry too much about this." His casual response stunned me. "Not worry? They're trying to steal what my father built. Just trust me," he said calmly. "Your father was a very thorough man." The next morning, I arrived at Langford's office downtown 15 minutes early, anxiety churning in my stomach. His receptionist immediately escorted me to his corner office, where the 68-year-old attorney stood gazing out his window at the cityscape. "Ah, Daniel," he said, turning to shake my hand. "Coffee?" I declined impatiently. "Mr. Langford, with all due respect, I need to understand why you're so calm about this situation." He gestured to the chair opposite his desk and settled into his own leather seat. "Before we discuss their claim, tell me something. Did your father ever mention any special provisions regarding the inheritance of his business?" I frowned. "No. The will reading is scheduled for next week. I assumed it was straightforward. The business passes to me and Claire, with me maintaining controlling interest since I've been running it with him." Langford steepled his fingers. "And that is indeed the case. However, Harold added certain protection." He opened a drawer and removed a sealed envelope, with my father's distinctive handwriting, across the front. "To be opened only in the event of a challenge to my estate. Your father came to me 3 years ago, shortly after your divorce was finalized. He wanted to ensure that certain parties could never gain access to what he'd built." "Vanessa," I breathed, "he knew she'd try something like this." Langford nodded. "Harold never interfered in your marriage, Daniel. That wasn't his way, but he observed, and he protected what mattered most." He tapped the envelope. "This contains an addendum to his will, with very specific eligibility requirements for anyone seeking a share of Mercer Industries." "What kind of requirements?" "The kind your ex-wife could never meet." His eyes twinkled. "Along with documented evidence of why. For the first time since receiving their letter, I felt a weight lift. So their claim has no legal basis? Their claim, Langford said, leaning forward, is about to collapse spectacularly. He smiled, reminding me suddenly of my father, the same confident expression Dad wore when he knew he held all the cards in a negotiation. Let them come, Daniel, he said, echoing my father's business philosophy. Let them come with their demands and their posturing. Your father planned for this very scenario. I stared at the envelope, my father's final act of protection sitting there in plain view. Even now, even gone, he was still looking out for me, for all we had built together. What happens next? I asked. We wait for the formal will reading, Langford replied, returning the envelope to his drawer. Let them believe they have a chance until then. The look on their faces will be, he paused, searching for the right word, educational. As I left his office, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before my father's death, hope, and beneath it, a simmering anticipation for the moment, when Vanessa and her husband would learn exactly what kind of man my father had been, and exactly how thoroughly he had outsmarted them before they'd even made their move. That night I couldn't sleep. Mr. Langford's revelation kept replaying in my mind, along with fragments of memories I'd tried to suppress since my divorce from Vanessa. I got up at 3 a.m., made coffee, and retreated to my father's home office, which I hadn't had the heart to clean out yet. His presence lingered here, in the leather-bound books, the faint scent of his pipe tobacco, the precisely arranged desk. I ran my fingers along the edge of his old oak desk and remembered the countless hours he'd spent here, often working late into the night to build something that would last. The bottom drawer still contained an old photo album. I pulled it out and flipped through it, stopping at my wedding photos. Vanessa looked radiant and white, her smile dazzling as she gazed up at me. My father stood beside us, his expression harder to read, pride mixed with something else I couldn't identify at the time. Now I knew. It was caution. You saw right through her, didn't you, Dad? I whispered to the empty room. From the very beginning, Vanessa had shown little interest in understanding Mercer Industries. She'd attend company events looking stunning, charming everyone with her perfect smile and practice small talk. But whenever I discussed the business, its challenges, its future, her eyes would glaze over. It's just so industrial, she'd say with a delicate wrinkle of her nose. Wouldn't you rather start something more exciting? Tech is where the real money is. At first I thought she was just uninterested. Then came the suggestions. The East Side facility is practically obsolete, she'd insisted over dinner with potential investors, friends of hers. Daniel's father refuses to sell it, but it's sitting on prime real estate. Once Daniel takes over, I'd cut her off, embarrassed and angry. Later that night, we'd had our first major fight. Those were potential partners, she'd hissed. They have capital we could use to modernize. We don't need outside capital, I'd replied, and we're not selling the East Side facility. 30 families depend on those jobs. She'd rolled her eyes. This sentimentality is exactly why family businesses fail in the second generation. The memory still stung, but it wasn't the worst of it. 6 months later, I discovered she'd been forwarding confidential company emails to those same investors. Financial statements, projections, client lists. When confronted, she'd claimed she was just getting advice to help me position myself to take over. You're too close to see the opportunities, she'd insisted. Your father's methods are outdated. Dad never said a word when I told him about the breach. He'd simply nodded and implemented new security protocols the next day. But now I understood he'd been paying attention to everything. The worst incident came about a year before our divorce. An anonymous tip had triggered an IRS audit of our company finances, specifically targeting transactions from the period when we'd acquired a smaller competitor. The timing was suspicious. Vanessa had been pressuring me to convince Dad to sell rather than expand. The audit found nothing improper, but it cost us time, money, and caused enormous stress, especially for Dad, who took pride in his meticulous record-keeping. I never could prove Vanessa was behind the tip, but 2 weeks after the audit concluded, I overheard her on the phone. It didn't work. They're too careful with their books. She claimed it was about a charity fundraiser when I questioned her, but her flush of guilt told me otherwise. Our marriage crumbled soon after. The divorce was quick but bitter. She demanded a portion of my stake in the company, claiming she'd sacrificed career opportunities to support my role in the family business. The judge had dismissed her claims entirely, noting she'd maintained her own career as an interior designer throughout our marriage, and there was no evidence she'd contributed to Mercer Industries in any meaningful way. She'd left the courtroom furious, hissing, "This isn't over," as she passed me. I thought it was just the anger talking. I never imagined she'd wait 3 years, find a wealthy, ambitious new husband, and try again after my father's death. The phone rang, jarring me from my thoughts. It was Claire. "I couldn't sleep either," she said when I answered. "I've been thinking about the things she did." "Me too. Remember when she tried to convince you to relocate production overseas? Dad was so angry." I sighed. She never understood what the company really meant to him. To us. It wasn't about understanding, Dan. It was about not caring. Claire paused. "I found something you should see. In Dad's home safe. I was looking for Mom's jewelry for the funeral and found a folder with Vanessa's name on it." My pulse quickened. "What's in it?" "Evidence. Dad kept receipts, Daniel. Every time she tried to interfere with the business, every scheme, every manipulation, he documented it all. There are even private investigator reports. Bring it to Langford's office tomorrow," I said, my voice steady with newfound resolve. "It's time we stopped playing defense." As I hung up, I looked at the wedding photo one more time before closing the album. The woman smiling back at me was a stranger, one who had tried to dismantle my family's legacy from within, and who was now back to claim what she'd failed to destroy. "Not this time," I promised my father's memory, "not ever." The day of the will reading arrived with a tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Dad's attorney had selected the main conference room at Mercer Industries for the occasion, a deliberate choice, I suspect. The room where my father had made every major business decision for 4 decades seemed a fitting place for his final wishes to be revealed. I arrived early with Claire, both of us dressed formally out of respect. Mr. Langford was already there, arranging documents on the polished mahogany table with methodical precision. He gave us a reassuring nod as we entered. "Are you ready for this?" he asked quietly. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied. Claire squeezed my hand. Dad knew what he was doing. At precisely 2 p.m., the conference room door opened again. Vanessa entered first, wearing an understated black dress that probably cost more than what many of our employees made in a month. Garrett followed, his expression a mask of professional detachment. Behind them came their attorney, Lawrence Pierce himself, founding partner of Blackwood and Pierce and one of the most aggressive corporate lawyers in the state. "Daniel." "Claire," Vanessa said with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you for accommodating our request to attend," as if they'd been invited rather than having forced their way in through legal threats. "Let's get started," Mr. Langford said before I could respond. "Please everyone be seated." The seating arrangement wasn't accidental either. Claire and I on one side, Vanessa's party on the other, with Langford at the head of the table. My father's empty chair at the opposite end remained conspicuously vacant. Langford began with standard legal formalities, his voice steady and authoritative as he confirmed the validity of the will and his authority as executor. Then he proceeded to read through the main provisions, most of which Claire and I already knew. Dad's house and personal effects were divided between Claire and me. His charitable foundation would continue its work supporting education for underprivileged youth. Various bequests to longtime employees and friends were listed. And then came the part everyone was waiting for. Regarding Mercer Industries, Langford read, adjusting his glasses. "Majority ownership shall pass to my son Daniel, who has worked alongside me for 15 years and proven himself more than capable of leading this company into the future. 20% of shares shall pass to my daughter Claire, with the remaining 5% distributed among senior management as detailed in Appendix C." Pierce leaned forward, his expression hungry. "And the addendum regarding spousal claims?" Langford looked up mildly. "I was just getting to that, counselor." He reached for a sealed envelope, the same one he'd shown me in his office. Opening it carefully, he removed several documents. Harold Mercer anticipated potential claims against his estate, Langford explained. He therefore added this legally binding addendum to his will 3 years ago, properly witnessed and notarized. He cleared his throat and began to read. "It has always been my belief that Mercer Industries should remain in the hands of those who have contributed to its success and demonstrated loyalty to its founding principles. Therefore, I hereby establish the following condition. Any individual seeking ownership interest in Mercer Industries must have actively contributed to the company's growth and shown unwavering loyalty to its mission for a minimum of 5 consecutive years. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Garrett placed a hand over hers, but his eyes had narrowed. Furthermore, Langford continued, any individual who has demonstrably acted against the company's interests shall be permanently disqualified from ownership, regardless of familial or marital connections. Pierce's pen froze mid-note. That's unnecessarily restrictive and potentially discriminatory. Your client, Langford interrupted, has a well-documented history of actions detrimental to Mercer Industries. With clinical precision, he pulled out a thick folder and began methodically laying out its contents on the table. Emails printed with headers intact, financial documents with Vanessa's digital fingerprints, phone records, text message transcripts, surveillance photos of meetings with competitors. Ms. Reynolds, now Mrs. Wilson, attempted on no fewer than 7 documented occasions to extract confidential information from Mercer Industries, for purposes contrary to the company's interests. Langford stated, pointing to specific evidence. She actively undermined expansion efforts, attempted to force unnecessary asset sales, and most seriously appears to have been the source of an anonymous tip that triggered a baseless IRS audit. I watched the blood drain from Vanessa's face as her past machinations were exposed one by one. Garrett slowly withdrew his hand from hers, staring at the evidence with growing alarm. You never told me any of this, he hissed at her, low enough that he probably thought no one else could hear. Pierce recovered quickly, shuffling papers. These allegations are irrelevant to our claim, which is based on marital property law, not the deceased's personal opinions about. The addendum has been reviewed by the state's top estate attorneys, Langford cut in. It's legally binding and specifically crafted to address this exact scenario. He turned a page. Additionally, Harold Mercer explicitly named Vanessa Reynolds in this document as an individual permanently barred from any ownership interest in Mercer Industries, directly or by proxy. Vanessa found her voice at last. This is absurd, she sputtered. These documents they're taken out of context. I was trying to help modernize an outdated business model. By leaking confidential financial information to competitors? Claire asked, speaking for the first time. By trying to force the closure of our East Side facility where 30 families depend on those jobs? The conference room fell silent. Pierce whispered urgently to his clients, while Garrett's expression darkened with each passing second. I think we're done here, Langford said finally, gathering the documents. Unless you'd like me to continue detailing the evidence. I have another 47 pages. Pierce stood abruptly. We'll need to review our position in light of this information. As they prepared to leave, Garrett turned to Vanessa. We'll discuss this at home, he said coldly. The look he gave her contained none of the smug confidence he'd shown at the funeral. I felt no triumph as they left. Only a profound gratitude for my father's foresight and a deep sadness that it had been necessary at all. Pierce requested a 15-minute recess to confer with his clients. Langford graciously agreed, and the 3 of them retreated to a small meeting room down the hall. Through the glass partition, I could see animated gestures and Vanessa's increasingly desperate expression. Garrett stood with his arms crossed, a storm brewing on his face. They're imploding, Claire observed, sipping the water Langford's assistant had brought in. Garrett clearly had no idea what he was getting into. He thought he'd married into a gold mine, I said. Instead, he's discovering she's radioactive. Langford gathered his papers methodically. Your father suspected something like this might happen. About 6 months after your divorce was finalized, Daniel, he came to my office unannounced. He told me, Richard, my son's ex-wife is the type who doesn't stay defeated for long. She'll be back when she thinks I'm not around to stop her. He knew her better than I did, I admitted. No, Langford corrected gently. He just had the benefit of emotional distance. Love can blind us to things that are obvious to others. The door opened, and Pierce returned alone, his professional demeanor noticeably strained. Mr. Langford, may we speak privately? The 2 attorneys stepped outside. Through the glass I watched their conversation, Pierce talking rapidly, Langford mostly listening with occasional short responses. After a few minutes they shook hands and Langford returned while Pierce went back to his clients. They're withdrawing their claim, Langford announced. unable to completely hide his satisfaction. Mr. Wilson has apparently had a change of heart about pursuing this matter. Before I could respond, the door burst open. Vanessa stormed in, her composure completely shattered, with Garrett and Pierce hurrying behind. "This is not over," she declared, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You think you've won? Your father manipulated evidence to make me look bad because he never thought I was good enough for his precious son and company." "Vanessa, that's enough," Pierce warned, trying to take her arm. She shook him off. "No, I won't be painted as some corporate saboteur when I was only trying to drag this company into the 21st. By triggering an IRS audit?" I asked calmly. "By leaking confidential information to competitors? That's not. I never," she sputtered. "The phone records don't lie," Claire interjected. "Neither do the email timestamps or the bank transfers from Westlake Partners, our biggest competitor, to your personal account 9 days after you sent them our client list." Vanessa's face went from flushed to ashen in seconds. Garrett's head snapped toward her. "You were paid?" he asked, incredulously. "You told me this was about claiming what was rightfully yours through marriage. You never mentioned taking money to leak information." "It wasn't like that," she insisted, her voice rising. "It was a consulting fee. I was offering insights into outdated business practices." "Consulting?" I repeated. "Is that what you call corporate espionage these days?" Garrett stepped away from her, physically distancing himself. "Are these allegations true? Were you paid to share company information?" When she didn't immediately deny it, his expression hardened. "Do you realize what this could mean for my reputation, for my business? I'm on the boards of 3 publicly traded companies." "Garrett, please," she reached for him, but he recoiled. "Mr. Wilson," Langford interjected smoothly, "I should mention that your personal liability in this matter remains undetermined. While we have no evidence of your direct involvement in past actions, your current legal maneuvers could potentially be characterized as attempted fraud if pursued further." Pierce winced visibly. "My clients are withdrawing all claims, effective immediately. We'll have formal documentation to you by tomorrow." "Garrett, you can't possibly believe," Vanessa started, but he cut her off with a gesture so dismissive it made even me flinch. "Not another word," he said, his voice glacial. "Lawrence, draw up whatever paperwork is needed to end this immediately. And prepare a statement distancing me personally from these revelations." The look he gave Vanessa would have frozen hell itself. "As for you and I," he said quietly, "we have matters to discuss regarding our own arrangement." In that moment I almost felt sorry for her.
Almost.
Pierce, ever the professional, gathered his briefcase. "We apologize for any distress this process may have caused during your time of grief. Please consider this matter closed." As they turned to leave, Vanessa made one last desperate attempt. "Daniel," she said, her voice suddenly soft, reminiscent of how she'd speak when trying to persuade me years ago. "You know me? You know I would." "I thought I knew you," I interrupted. "My father saw you clearly from the beginning. I should have trusted his judgment." Her face crumpled for just a moment before the mask slipped back on. Without another word, she turned and followed her husband and attorney out the door. The silence that followed their departure felt like a physical presence in the room. "Well," Claire said finally, "that was educational," Langford supplied, echoing his earlier prediction. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Is it really over?" "Legally, yes," Langford confirmed. "Their claim had no merit to begin with, and now they've been confronted with evidence that could potentially lead to criminal charges if pursued. Mr. Wilson appears to value his reputation too highly to risk that." "And Vanessa?" Claire asked. Langford shrugged. "Based on Mr. Wilson's reaction, I'd say her immediate concern won't be Mercer Industries." As we gathered our things to leave, I paused by my father's empty chair at the end of the table. I could almost see him there, watching over us with that slight smile he wore when a plan came together perfectly. "Thank you, Dad," I whispered, "for everything." 3 months passed. Spring arrived, bringing new growth to the city, and a sense of renewal I desperately needed. The company continued to run smoothly, a testament to my father's careful planning and the strong team he'd built over decades. I hadn't heard directly from Vanessa since that day in the conference room, though the grapevine brought occasional news. Garrett had filed for annulment, claiming fraudulent misrepresentation. They'd sold their lavish home in Oakwood Heights. She'd left town shortly after. reportedly moving west to start over. On a crisp April morning, I met Mr. Langford for breakfast at my father's favorite diner, a no-frills place where Dad had eaten the same meal, black coffee and wheat toast with 2 eggs over easy, every Sunday for 20 years. "I have something for you," Langford said, after we'd ordered. He slid a sealed envelope across the table. "Your father asked me to give you this 3 months after everything was settled, not before." The envelope bore my name in Dad's distinctive handwriting. My heart tightened at the sight of it. "He wrote this knowing what would happen?" I asked. "Not specifically," Langford clarified, "but he prepared for multiple possibilities. This letter was marked, 'If Daniel faces a challenge for the company, and prevails.'" I stared at the envelope. "There were other letters?" "Several," Langford nodded. "For different scenarios." "Your father was thorough." Our food arrived and we ate in companionable silence while the envelope sat between us like a visitor from another time. Finally, I carefully opened it and unfolded the single page inside. "Daniel, if you're reading this, then someone has tried to take what we built, and you've successfully defended it." I had my suspicions about who that someone might be, but the specifics don't matter now. What matters is this: defending something valuable is only the beginning. The harder task is building it further, making it stronger, ensuring it outlasts the next challenge, and the one after that. I never told you why I started Mercer Industries. The official story that I saw an opportunity in precision manufacturing is true but incomplete. The deeper truth is that I wanted to build something that couldn't be taken away. My own father lost everything in a bad partnership deal when I was 12. I watched helplessly as others claimed what he'd worked for, because he trusted too easily and didn't protect what mattered. I vowed never to make the same mistake. Not just for myself, but for you and Claire. But protection alone isn't enough. A business, like a life, can't just be defended. It must grow, adapt, breathe. This is where you and I differ, son, and why I've always known you would take Mercer further than I ever could. Where I saw threats, you see possibilities. Where I built walls, you build bridges. Don't let this experience change that about you. Learn from it, yes, but don't let it harden you. The world has enough cautious, defensive leaders. Be bold. Take calculated risks. Trust, but wisely with your eyes open. The company is fully yours now. My voice should no longer echo in your decisions. I've done my part by giving you a solid foundation and protecting it until you were ready. What you build on that foundation is entirely up to you. With pride and love." I read the letter twice more, tears blurring my vision by the third reading. Even now he was teaching me, guiding me without constraining me. "Letting me go?" "He never said any of this to me," I said finally, carefully refolding the letter. Langford smiled gently. Harold wasn't one for grand speeches. He believed actions revealed more than words ever could. He spent years documenting evidence, creating legal protections, anticipating threats, all without saying a word to me about it. "That was his way of showing love," Langford said, quiet, methodical. "Absolute." That afternoon I called an executive meeting. The senior leadership team gathered in the same conference room where Vanessa's claims had crumbled. These men and women had been through everything with us. The growth years, the recession, technological disruption, and now, my father's passing. "My father built this company to last," I began. "He protected it fiercely, sometimes in ways we never saw until they were needed. That chapter of Mercer Industries is now complete." I paused, looking at each face around the table. "Today we begin writing the next chapter. I've reviewed the expansion proposals that were put on hold during recent events. I believe it's time to move forward with the advanced manufacturing facility. It's time to grow again." The energy in the room shifted palpably, from respectful attention to genuine excitement. For months we'd been in maintenance mode, preserving what was. Now finally we were building again. Later that evening, I visited my father's grave for the first time since the funeral. The headstone had been installed the previous week. Simple, elegant black granite with his name, dates, and the words he'd chosen. He built something that lasted. I placed a small model of the proposed new facility beside the fresh flowers. Claire had left earlier. "I'm doing what you said, Dad," I said quietly. "Building on your foundation, taking calculated risks, moving forward." A warm breeze stirred the trees overhead. and for just a moment I felt his presence, not behind me, pushing or protecting, but beside me, witnessing. I left the cemetery with a lightness I hadn't felt since before his death. The company was secure, the future was open, and the most valuable inheritance my father had left me wasn't the business itself, but the wisdom to know when to defend it and when to help it grow. Some legacies are measured in dollars and assets. The best ones are measured in lessons learned and wisdom passed down. By that measure, I was wealthy beyond counting.